Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. So let's jump right into it. I had an okay week. I'll show you. We'll talk about it. The first thing I read, let me jump right in. I'm doing a little class on the Tudor period with some friends that were supposed to go to Oxford together that we didn't get a chance to. And so we've been watching movies and then talking about how the movies of the Tudor period kind of reflect back what's happening in the era in which they were created. It's been incredibly interesting, very, very cool. It ends this week, and we're finishing up with Wolf Hall, of course, and watching the BBC adaptation, which is pretty much Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies together. But last week, the assignment was to read a book that I had in Folio Society edition. And this is Josephine Tey's The Daughter of Time. And this is just such a wacky Folio Society edition of this book because it has all of these, well, number one, just a gorgeous chart to kind of keep track of all of these English monarchs. And then it has these very modern type collages, as you can see there, just very, very strange. This was such an interesting book. What's so interesting about what Josephine Tey did, she's known as a crime fiction writer, kind of the golden age of crime, British crime fiction, I should say. And she created this very interesting puzzle. And so we have our main character, Alan Grant. He's a Scotland Yard inspector. And he is stuck in a hospital room because he hurt himself chasing after a culprit. And so he's stuck and he's bored out of his mind. He keeps having friends come and visit him, specifically this one actress woman. And he's just getting crankier and crankier. And so she tries to bring him books and do things, but he doesn't like any of the stuff that he has. And he's got an inquisitive mind, and he is known for being able to read things into faces. And so she takes this tidbit and comes back to him with all of these portraits that have mysteries associated with the people in the portraits. And so as he's kind of flipping through these portraits, which is an interesting premise, he stumbles upon Richard III. And he's really, really taken with his portrait. And he said, well, what's the story here? What's the mystery? And she said, oh, don't you know? He killed his two nephews, but nobody knows how he did it. And so that starts the mystery. And so the mystery is really solved through this partnership with this historian who works at the British Library. And so they have a really interesting kind of bantery relationship where he brings a bunch of material, and then Alan sits there and kind of puzzles it all out. Now a lot of what they come up with is fiction and, kind of looking at conspiracies. But what's so fascinating is, and I think what's so relevant for today's times, is that they talk about myth making and how myth is used as a political tool, and the creation of these myths that, oh, this happened when that never happened, and how it creates its own life. And I think that's perfectly relevant in this time of fake news and propaganda that's kind of infiltrated through social media. So I found this much more interesting than I think I would have if I read it at any other time, and the context of studying it in along with the Tudor period and all of this was even more interesting. So that one I highly recommend. Next up, I finished The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. Again, I wanted to kind of pull all these elements together. I'm already in real life book club, and we are reading the Booker shortlist, and of course she is on that list. And we're also reading the Women's Prize, and I think she's also on the Women's Prize list. So I did the whole series, even though I read the book before. I did the whole series this time in audiobook, and it was phenomenal. I highly recommend it. It is a very, very long book. It's long whether you read it, it's long whether you listen to it. So up to you how you want to spend your time with Thomas Cromwell. I still find that Bring Up the Bodies is my favorite of the trilogy, but in this one we get this kind of final installment, and the tension is ratcheted up. There's anxiety, there's kind of muddling, there's the walls are tightening in, and we get to see Cromwell who on the decline as opposed to the ascent. So it's very, very interesting. I think she pulled the series together in such a strong way. Also agree that there is a lot of repetition there, and there's a lot there that doesn't need, that could be lost and still preserve the integrity of the book. But I'm very happy that I tackled the project and completed it. Next up, I did the audiobook of The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. Now, I've liked Emma Donoghue's work before. I liked her Frog Music, which is set in the Barbary Coast, San Francisco. I have liked her The Wonder. I like her tone and how she writes historical fiction. So when I heard that she had a new book coming out, I immediately jumped on my library holds and put in for both the audio and the physical copy. The audio came up first, and since I had just finished The Mirror and the Light, I thought, okay, let's try it. So what's interesting about this book is that she delivered it to her printer just as COVID-19 was kicking up. And what makes that so interesting is that this book is set in Dublin in the flu pandemic of 1918. So a little prescient there. So it's a maternity ward during the pandemic. We have our main character is Nurse Julia, and she's very compassionate, trying to separate her life from her work and trying to stay sane during this time, dealing with a lot of sexism, a lot of discrimination because she's a woman. And so there are things that she needs to do in this maternity ward that she has to wait for men to approve, which you can imagine to be very, very frustrating. There's a young woman who comes to volunteer, and her name is Bridie. And Bridie is just such a wide-eyed innocent, but very, very capable. And so you see that's a very interesting pairing between the two of them. And then you have Dr. Kathleen, who is very, very smart, very capable, but there's some mystery and scandal to her. So that also makes an interesting element. Overall, I liked this book. I didn't like it as much as some of her other ones that I've read, only because the pacing was a little off for me. There were some periods where we go really, really deep into maternity, what happens in a maternity ward and what happened during these times, which I think is very interesting. I just don't know that we needed as much of it. And it really, once we left the maternity, those operating kind of scenes, the story, I think, really expanded in a more interesting way. So I think that some of those scenes could have been cut a little bit, and we could have gotten the flavor and the tone of what she's experiencing, and then moved on to the other part of the story. But overall, I liked it, and I thought it was really, really interesting to read something that wasn't done for the pandemic, but yet featured a pandemic. So I gave that a 3, and I do recommend it. Just know the pacing is a little iffy. So that's what I completed. I will say that I kind of hit a little bit of a wall with my reading this week, because what I'm reading is so specific that it requires a specific mindset in order to approach it. Let me tell you what I'm reading. You're going to see this for a while, because I plan on reading all of In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. This is Swans Way, Volume 1, and we're about, I would say, almost to the halfway point, finishing the first section. This is in 3 sections. The first section has 2 chapters. And so we finished the first 2 chapters. I'm reading this with Leo of A Little Book Life, and he's being incredibly generous in his pacing. This is not the kind of book that you just sink into, and this is the kind of book that you need to pay attention, because it could have you meandering in your own thoughts, because it's about memory and remembrances, and it's so sensory that it can have that effect that he's describing, where you see something and it takes you into your past, into your own thoughts. And so you really have to come. I have to come to this in a place where I'm not preoccupied with other worries. I'm not looking for escapism. I'm looking for something to kind of settle into. So that means that I can't really do it after work, where I'm still a little frazzled from the day. This is kind of a Saturday morning, Sunday morning kind of read for me. And so it's going to take me a little longer. What we have is in this section, he's remembering his summers spent in Cambrai. And he's specifically opening with his aunt, his great aunt, Leilani, and she has become an invalid after the death of her husband, and she is only in 2 rooms of the house, and she has a nurse who really looks after the rest of the family when they come to visit, and tends to maybe not spend as much time with the aunt when they arrive. And we have the aunt who just kind of sits and watches what happens in the city, in this little town of Cambrai, and gets visits and always wants to know what's happening. So she wants these reports so that she can feel connected, even though she's not going out anymore. And there's a woman, Eulalie, who comes and visits, and Leilani always gives her a little coin and everything. And there's a little bit of of a very funny rivalry between Francoise and Eulalie. And then you have other members of this town that you start to spend time with and kind of see his childlike view of what's happening with them and their relationship with each other in this town. And then you have nature writing, the like of which I have never read before. Just magnificent. What he does is, it's almost, this is going to sound like such a strange comparison, but it's almost psychedelic in the fact that he can hone in with such clarity on a small little thing and describe it for lengths of period with such detail and such emotion and depth that you feel like the lens, the aperture has just shrunken in, but you're 100% there. And there's so much emotion, there's so much sensuality and feeling. He brings all senses to smell, taste, touch, everything into his descriptions. It's remarkable. It is astounding writing. I get it. I get why this is considered a masterpiece. And so I'm taking my time with it. This is going to be like ducks. You're going to see me holding it up. And this and the further ones for a very long time. So keep that in mind. Then I'm also doing another buddy read in a similar vein, but a little different. This is a writer's diary, being extracts from the diary of Virginia Woolf. I'm doing this with Elizabeth of Bookish North. And I read a little bit last weekend and was able to catch up. This is a weekend read in the sense that I want to be present because she's giving us so many details of what's happening at the time and so many people that I maybe have heard of or heard the name, but I don't really know of. And so I really want to take the time to kind of think about all of that and contextualize it. But she's fascinating, and what you get in here is so ripe for conversation. I'm so happy that I'm doing a buddy read of this one as well. And Elizabeth is also being generous in letting me kind of take my time with this also. So as you can see, those are 2 heady books. So I needed something a little shorter, pithier, and the perfect thing came in Zadie Smith's Intimations. So this is 6 essays that she's just done. She did this during lockdown. And I read the first last weekend when I was at the park. I had a little park date with my in real life book club. We all met up in a park, sat on different blankets, and had a reading date. And it was sublime until a snake was beelining its way to me. And the only reason I knew that was happening was this little girl screamed at the top of her lungs, "Snake!" That little girl is my hero. I wish I could have rewarded her, but I grabbed the 4 corners of my blanket and was out with a quickness. It was no joke. I'm not down for snakes in any way, shape, or form. It was Nikki and my friends Nikki and Lydia stayed, and they kind of looked and took pictures and everything. And Lydia actually got video of it coming, and I thought, no, I can't do that. It was harmless. We all know snakes are demons, so there's no harmless snake. Anyway, so that interrupted my reverie with this, but I did get a chance to read the first essay and really liked it. So I'm going to continue with this. So let me tell you about the book that is everything, that's doing all of the most amazing things for me. And it is one of my latest of my Book of the Month Club selections. This was in the editions section. So if you're a Book of the Month Club person, you're going to have to search it out in the kind of edition space. And it was in the YA section. This is The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Junauda Petrus. Now, Sean from Past Story Time had talked about this in one of her Instagram stories. And I think she also talked about it maybe during Reading Rush, but she was in love with this. And it sounded so good that when I saw it, I immediately grabbed it. This is, it's just like a hot summer night in a book. And we've got these two young people. Audrey's from Trinidad, and we opened with her and her grandmother, and she is in a lot of pain, emotional pain, and crying and very, very upset. And her grandmother is comforting her by taking her to the water. And they both share a very special bond. Her grandmother is a healer, and her grandmother is talking to her about how this pain will shape her for the future, and about listening and trusting her intuition, and trying to look at the path that she's about to take, and making some decisions, and trusting the spirits and the guides and all of that. And Audrey has also some conjurer and healer ways about her. And I say that because I want to say this is not magical realism, and this is not fantasy. This is more cultural application of like the healing arts with herbal teas and natural medicines, and just kind of this inclusion with nature and all of that. But you see the bond between these two, the grandmother and her granddaughter. We find out that Audrey had fallen in love with another young girl, and her mother is horrified and upset because her mother is very deeply into the church. And as such, she's sending her daughter away to live with her father, who moved to the United States. Then we switch over and we meet Mabel in Minneapolis. And Mabel is a young woman, and she's trying to figure out like her gender as well as her sexuality. She's dated a guy, and she really liked him, and she liked some of the aspects of like cuddling with him and some of that intimacy, but not when it became sexual. But she really cared about him. And so, but at the same time, she's noticing an attraction for some girls. And so she's in that awkward period of trying to figure it out. Mabel and Audrey's families know each other. And so I've just come to the part where, even though they've met many years ago when they were both very young, now that Audrey has come to live with her father, they go over there to have dinner and we get them reunited. And it is delightful. The sparks are flying. There's so many beautiful aspects to this book. It's written in a beautiful way. And yeah, it's exactly what I was looking for as a counterbalance, something that is just kind of a present contemporary that I'm enjoying, that's well written, but I can just kind of jump in and just mindlessly read and just go along with the story. So I'm delighted, and I really, really hope this keeps up in the beautiful way that it's started. So that's what's currently on tap. Let me then talk to you about what I could read. So obviously I still have my women in translation choices back here. None of them have, I wasn't in the mood when I saw this last one. But, and I had a couple other things come in. So the first up, my edition of summer came in. So I have the full collection now in this gorgeous cloth-bound hardcover with the David Hockney cover. I'm so delighted. But, y'all, this is another thinking book. So I don't know that I'm ready for this yet. But it's calling me. It's calling me. And I mentioned before, I'll do a formal introduction to this a little later on. I'm going to wait a little bit in a few months, but I am going to do a read along of all four, starting with Autumn. So even though I have this, I don't, who knows? I might grab it, but I don't know. It is calling to me. Then in my Book of the Month Club choice, where I received The Stars and the Blackness Between Them, I also got the new hit that everyone's raving about, Luster. This is by Raven Leilani. This looks like it's going to be fantastic. It doesn't look like it's too long, so I might jump into this. And then the other one that I got on my Book of the Month choice is the Akwaeke Emezi's The Death of Vivek OG. Now, I have not read Freshwater, and I need to. I have it here. I think I'm going to jump straight in with this because I'm hearing great things about it. All of these, who knows? I could grab it. I could grab one of those. I could grab something different. You never know. You'll have to come back next week and see what I did pick up. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you so much for joining me again. Please stay safe, socially distant, wear your mask, and most importantly, don't touch your face. Hope to see you again next week. Bye.